Despite a 5.9% cost of living adjustment that went into effect in January, many Social Security beneficiaries have lost buying power to this year's inflation burst. Some goods and services that are most important to older adults have been hit hardest by inflation. The price of gasoline, for example, jumped 30.3% in the 12 months ending in April, and food prices rose nearly 9.5%. Medical services, however, rose just 3.5%. Older adults who are overconfident about their health are putting it at risk, according to a study published in the Journal of the Economics of Aging. It found that those older adults go to the doctor 17% less frequently than adults who correctly assess their health status. This puts them at greater risk for missing crucial screenings that can detect diseases early. That's your AARP Minute. See you Sunday.
Hello, my name is Jeff Scott, Associate State Director for AARP Illinois. AARP is a nonprofit and nonpartisan member organization that's been working to promote the health and well-being of older Americans for more than 60 years. I want to welcome you to this important conversation about inflation and the effect that it's having on Illinoisans, specifically those 50 plus who are feeling the effects as much or more than any other segment of the population. I'll be having this conversation with the Illinois Manufacturers Association President and CEO, Mark Dinsler, and the President and CEO of the Illinois Retail Merchants Association, Rob Carr. They are industry leaders in manufacturing in the retail sectors in Illinois, and we're looking forward to hearing what they have to say today. As the nation struggles to climb out of the pandemic, it's important to understand what is happening in the economy, and specifically inflation. Many of those 50 plus in Illinois and around the country are on fixed incomes, and the rapid increase in inflation is forcing them to make extremely difficult decisions in their everyday life. Inflation is affecting every aspect of our spending, and this conversation will shine some light on what is causing the issues, what is being done about it, and possibly most importantly, when can we expect to see some relief from inflation? In the face of these trying times, AARP is providing information and resources to help our older adults and those caring for them. If you'd like to stay on top of the most recent and up-to-date information after this event, you can visit our website at states.aarp.org/Illinois. So with that, let's get started with our conversation. I'd like to welcome our guest today and thank you for joining us to talk about this important topic. I know you both are extremely busy, and we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. Mark, I'm going to start with you. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your organization.
Well, good morning, Jeff. Thank you, and thanks to AARP for having Rob and myself here today. The Illinois Manufacturers Association is the nation's oldest and one of the largest state manufacturing trade associations in the country. Founded in 1893, the IMA today represents about 4,000 member companies and facilities that range from Caterpillars and John Deeres of the world down to small family tool and die shops that are in every county across the state of Illinois. Manufacturers today employ 562,000 women and men on factory floors and contribute the single largest share of Illinois' gross state product. And again, it's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you. And Rob?
Good morning, Jeff. Thanks again for having us. So we enjoy doing this with you periodically and reaching out to your members who, frankly, are an important part of the customer base that our members serve. Illinois Retail Merchants Association represents retailers of all types and sizes, from the largest to the smallest, and in every sector: grocery, hardware, restaurant, pharmacy, movie theaters, you name it. We have representation of it within our membership. And so we look forward to discussing this important topic with you and your members this morning.
Very good. Thanks, guys. Now I'm going to go straight into some questions. Gentlemen, like everyone, both your organization's members have been enormously impacted by inflation. Please, if you will, give us some insight on what's been happening in the past few months and how inflation has impacted your members. Rob, I'm going to stay with you.
Okay. Yeah. Great question, Jeff. And I think I know you're trying to focus on the first few months, but we have to go back to the beginning of COVID, because it really did trigger so much of what we're facing today. Increased demand, shift in demand. I think what's often understated is the shift in production for Mark's members who were serving one day certain segments, restaurants, for example, and taverns and others. to then serving all of us staying at home. And most people think toilet paper, for example, is toilet paper, but it's not, or ketchup is ketchup, and it's not. The product might be the same, but it's packaged differently, it's made differently by Mark's members, and it's sold differently by my members. So all of that impacted. Then there was the increased demand on the supply chain, which had reverberations to the economy. So you had this increased demand, and then you had additional spending by the government. So you actually had more people at home with time and money to spend, and they did so. And so you had this, kind of it's not a virtuous cycle, but this cycle that led to where we are today. And then today, as we're seeing the pandemic really ease and we're getting more into an endemic situation where we're learning to live with it, we're now confronted with higher oil prices, which impacts everything that we touch. We always think about the cars or planes, but literally everything we touch, wear, a lot of what we consume, from medicines, even foods, have interact in some point with gas prices. So it really, you have to go back that far to trace it today, and it's going to take a while to work through.
Right. Mark, do you want to add anything about your members?
Well, again, I would echo what Rob said, and everyone knows inflation is the overall price increase or cost increase on goods and services. Over time, currency like the United States dollar loses the value, doesn't have as much purchasing power. As Rob noted, it can be caused by a number of things: higher wages, lower interest rates, supply chain issues, broader issues such as the global economy. And I would really echo what Rob said: the massive infusion of federal government money into people's pocketbooks over the last 2 years has really been a contributing factor to this as well.
Right. And you guys have answered my second question already, so I will move on. Rob, I'm going to go to you because this has to do with the retail sector. And Mark, jump in at the end if you'd like to. How does the high inflation impact our grocery prices? Groceries are obviously a huge part of everyone's day-to-day life. Give me the answer to that. And also, do you think the prices will continue to rise? And maybe, Mark, you may be better off to answer that second part of that. But Rob?
Yeah, I'll defer to Mark on how prices continue to rise. Let's hope not. But my short answer is it just depends. It just depends on a number of factors. You think about things very quickly, like the Ukrainian war. Who knew that was going to be a compounding factor? But it is. So anything like that could pop up that no one anticipates. In terms of groceries in particular, we're going to continue to see the impacts of inflation for some time. It takes time to work through. Mark made a really important point about the U.S. dollar. As the U.S. dollar weakens, imports become more expensive. We being the United States, are the largest importer of goods and services, accounting for to about 14% of the total imports worldwide. And so that is really a significant impact on all we do, not just oil prices, but when the U.S. dollar falls, that impacts all of us negatively. But we'll continue to see groceries prices struggle for a bit. We've seen oil prices recently fall just a little bit. If that can continue for a period of time, then we will start to see that work its way through. But I think what's important to note is Mark's members continue to make, and we continue to sell products that were made on oils purchased at a higher price. So just because oil fell yesterday doesn't mean we see prices reduced tomorrow. It really takes time to work through. So Jeff, I don't have a definitive answer, but we're going to continue to see price impacts for some time.
Jeff, what I would see is what we've seen in the latest report that came out from the Fed a few days ago: 9.1% inflation, which is the highest inflationary rate since 1981. So we're seeing the highest inflationary costs or pressures in 40 years. And so that impacts, as you noted, the price of groceries at retail stores or the price of fuel. We're going to, I think, continue to see it. And year over year, we've seen a 54% increase in the cost of energy and about a 14 or 15% increase in the price of food. And again, there's a number of different factors that Rob talked about: the cost of labor, staffing or producing these goods, the price of fuel to transport it. And there's two ways, Jeff, that the Federal Reserve, really can manage this: adjusting interest rates, number one, either higher or lower, and two, qualitative and quantitative easing of of Treasury-backed securities. The Fed traditionally likes to keep inflation at about 2%. We're right now 4 times that. So we've seen the Fed take steps to increase interest rates to kind of slow down the economy a little bit to try to keep that inflation in check. But right now we continue to see rising oil prices, as Rob mentioned, that really drives a lot of the other price increases that we're seeing.
Yeah, so you mentioned the interest rate issue, and it kind of reminds me, and Rob, you were talking about, it's kind of like a slow motion domino effect that you're watching. And I remember in the 2009 housing bust, and just watching everything, from it started there, then it, went into the job market and that sort of thing. It seems like we're kind of reliving some of that again. But with the Fed's increasing the interest rate, and I'll let either one of you speak to this, are there, besides, the price of borrowing money, are there other negative effects that we might see because of the rise of the interest rates?
Well, I think and Mark, please jump in, but I think the borrowing is the key part because when we think of borrowing, it's not just borrowing for a home or a car, some other tangible asset product like that. It's borrowing for your credit card. The cost of money is more than just those tangible, long-term loan type things. So it impacts all that we do, but that's the point of it. That the Fed has increased interest rates more sharply than they initially signaled. They initially signaled they were going to do approximately 6 half-point increases, right? And we've seen a 1%, and now there's some disagreement as to just how high they're going to go on the next one. With the Atlanta Reserve Chair signaling perhaps desire to do something higher. But that cools everything. And while that can be a negative, from the Fed's perspective, that's what's needed to help cool the demand. Mark mentioned earlier, all the extra money that the federal government and to a certain extent the states pumped into the economy during the COVID shutdown. Not a criticism, probably needed to be done. Could we have done it maybe a little less or differently? Perhaps, but that's 2020 hindsight, right? Who knew at the time? But that had an impact, and now we're dealing with some of those impacts.
Well, and I would note, there's been a lot of discussion, Jeff, in Washington, D.C., and U.S. Senator Joe Manchin has taken a lot of heat for not supporting President Biden's Build Back Better program. And his concern at the time, and I think continues today, is flooding more money into the marketplace when we have significantly increasing inflation. And I think the recent discussions, he said he wants to wait and see inflation numbers next month before making a decision about whether the federal government should inject more dollars in. But Rob said now's a great time to go visit Europe if you want to do that, because the U.S. dollar has overtaken the euro for the first time in decades. The euro is at its lowest level. But to Rob's point, just everything costs more. But the interest rates rising, Rob hit the nail on the head. When you have to pay 5 or 6% interest to buy a house, for example, or a car, you're used to getting it at 0.9 or 1.9%. And now you might have to pay, 4.9 or 5.9 or 6.9. That puts some brakes on the economy. And I know we're going to talk a little bit later then, what does that do? Does that put us into recession or not? And I think we'll have some discussions on that. But this is the Fed's way of trying to slow down the economy to control inflation.
Jeff, the one thing to point out too, to add on to what Mark just said, is the one thing that often happens when you have an increase in interest rates is the dollar strengthens. So while at the moment it's, Mark correctly points out where we are with the euro, and it's time to travel if you want to do it. But what we should see is imports actually start to cost less because the dollar strengthens. Have we seen that yet? No, but it's early in the monetary process.
Right. Interesting points. And I want to go back to, we've had discussions before about food insecurity, and, we all saw the big container ships sitting and waiting to be ported and that sort of thing. So what you just said, Rob, what's been, is that still occurring? You don't see that on the news every day. What effect did that have? I think we know what it did. I think, is that piece over as these dominoes slowly fall? Could we see that again, or and either one can answer that question?
It's not over. But if we can use the analogy of the python who ate the deer, the deer is working its way through the python, right? And I think we're very near the end of that. But it pointed out exactly how COVID impacted what we're facing today, which is inflation, right? It impacted worldwide the supply chain. There weren't enough workers. They were ill. They wanted to protect themselves. Everything just had to slow down, and it took more to get products to us. But we all at the same time had more money chasing fewer products. That's one of the causes of inflation. Whether we continue to work through, it all depends on people's, there's still a huge demand, for example, a commercial driver's license, truck drivers, train drivers, dock workers. Dock capacity has expanded in the ports. The Biden administration took steps early on to do that, as did particularly the state of California. But, I go back to a comment we made near the very beginning. Who knew the Ukrainian war was going to happen? Right? If there's some sort of devastating typhoon, for example, that devastates some Chinese ports, or you just don't know what's going to happen. Assuming nothing like that happens, yeah, we're going to continue to improve.
And Jeff, what I would say with the supply chain, and Rob hit the nail on the head, 2 years of the pandemic, people, because of the federal inflow, people had a lot more money. They had a lot more money to spend and to order items when they were sitting at home and shopping online. But there weren't the workers to produce those goods or the folks to transport them. So you had this big supply and demand issue where there was a huge demand for these products and supply couldn't catch up. I would agree with Rob that we're slowly getting through it. There's still challenges out there. In the automotive sector, for example, finding microchips. You need those. There's 1,000 chips in a car, for example, and in your trucks and your aircraft and other things. And so we're still working through those. But as inflation increases and as interest rates increase, American people will buy less, and that demand will come down a little bit, and hopefully we'll catch up at some point.
And Jeff, I don't want to get ahead of you, and please stop me if I do.
Yeah,
but that's another, we had too much money chasing too little supply. But at the same time, companies all over the world, but particularly in the United States, were trying to get workers to come back, right? You had to incentivize them to return. So we have seen another cause of inflation, which is significant increases in wages and benefits being paid as to the cost of the products, but it also puts additional dollars in consumers' pockets. So it's become something of a cycle. So that has also impacted what we're facing today in terms of the inflation.
Right. You both kind of hit on the workers. And I know there was and the pandemic obviously was the reason that cycle started. And I know Illinois just had a really great jobs number to come out. And this is to either one of you. Is that, where are we on that? Are the workers back? Are we seeing, is there a sector that's missing workers still? I know we always need truck drivers and that sort of thing, but are we still seeing the job openings not being filled?
I'll jump in, Jeff. I know in manufacturing, it's still a challenge. Before the pandemic, in America, we had 437,000 open manufacturing jobs. Last month in the JOLTS report, which is job opening turnovers report, there were 1 million open manufacturing jobs in the country. So double what it was pre-pandemic. I don't think it's unique to manufacturing. You hear truck drivers and nurses and teachers and retail. I drive around Springfield, for example, and I see an Arby's sign on a corner by the mall, $17 an hour starting wage at Arby's, for example. So I think all sectors are struggling to find workers, particularly in the manufacturing sector and others. Wages are going up. So I think the workforce issue remains real. Manufacturers are looking how we can automate more. It's just a function of what we have to do to survive today.
Right.
Jeff, I would, echo Mark's comments. I would also point out that, your members were significant players in the job market, particularly in retail. I might add, I can't speak as knowledgeably about the manufacturing sector as Mark can, but particularly in retail. And because of the vulnerabilities that they have, just as a result of how we age, to COVID, many of them withdrew from the workforce and have not returned. It's not a criticism, but it is something that we have to adjust for. And so we're continuing to try to adjust. And, we don't begrudge having to pay people more money, but it does have the inflationary impact. And it hasn't totally been effective in bringing people back. And that's okay. That's understandable. They have to make choices for themselves, but we have to figure out where to find those workers and to fill those roles.
Right. And Jeff, I would add, Rob hit the nail on the head. Again, older Americans, and then two are young mothers that had problems with daycare, with schools. They're very slow to return to work as well. And, and it's just a challenge that we all have to face. I mean, we go to Springfield, there's a lot of restaurants that are no longer open for lunch, for example, or instead of being open 6 or 7 days a week, they're open 3 to 4 days a week just because they can't find the labor.
Right. I know everybody is learning to live with the new reality of wherever it is we're going, and we're all kind of just figuring it out. I wanted to ask, and I guess, Rob, maybe this is going towards you, maybe not totally in your purview, but I know that some of your members are pharmacies. And that one of the highlights, I guess, if you call it a highlight of the inflation that's going on, is that the healthcare cost has only gone up. What I read was 3.5%. Can you speak anything to actually the drug costs and where you see those going? That's an important, obviously, huge important impact on our members.
Well, to go back to a comment we made at the very beginning, and Mark might be able to talk about the pharma side of the pharmaceutical manufacturing side of it, but oil plays an important role in the production of medicines. So oil prices do impact that. I think going back to retail, though, I think one thing that was very good about what happened in the pandemic is pharmacies in particular became more of the front line for basic type services. All right, the federal government waived rules that allowed pharmacies and pharmacists to conduct a wide array of testing and immunizations. The state changed its law at our urging to allow for to lower the age to 7 and expand the number of immunizations. And what we've seen nationwide is a significant uptick in immunizations, not just COVID. People getting the health care that is preventative, that helps them going forward, that they were otherwise not getting because it's more convenient. So I know it's not exactly where we were going on the cost, Jeff, but certainly on the convenience side, we noted that we could expand the providers safely and give people more convenience, and they took it up. And hopefully we have longer term better outcomes then as a result.
And Jeff, I couldn't be more proud of the pharmaceutical manufacturers, particularly during the pandemic. As you know, they created the life-saving vaccines in the shortest time in history, safe and effective. I would shudder to think where we would be without those vaccines today. Whether people want to take them or not, they have saved millions of lives in the country. They continue to make life-saving products. We have serious concerns when government tries to put price controls on things because, again, it costs millions of dollars to develop pharmaceutical products, so life-saving measures. And these companies are continuing to innovate and find solutions and medicines and therapies that will treat seniors or young kids or whoever has a very serious illness or disease. And so they continue to produce those products. And I really want to hit on the energy part of it. We haven't talked a whole lot about. Rob talked about the oil. The United States is the leading producer of both oil and natural gas in the world. We surpassed Russia for natural gas and Saudi Arabia for oil a number of years ago, largely because of hydraulic fracking. What we've seen with this administration is really a rollback of the ability to produce and refine petroleum, for example. Some of the environmental advocates just don't want any carbon-based emissions. But to Rob's point, natural gas is the feedstock in fertilizer and many chemicals, and it's in food products, and it's in pharmaceuticals and clothing. And so when you cut off that supply, naturally you're going to increase costs because there's only a limited supply of these things. And then particularly in Illinois, I really want to talk about energy. As I noted, energy's increased 54% in the last year nationally. Illinois, particularly for those that are in central and southern Illinois, starting in June, you saw huge price spikes in your electricity bills. And that goes back, as Rob said, not just in the last couple of years, but Illinois in 2007 started re-regulating the energy market. They created a renewable portfolio standard saying, we're going to have X% of renewable energy. It's a great goal to have. But as we started doing that, we started closing baseload generation, and we don't have enough renewables to backfill that. So we set a goal of 20% by the year 2020. In 2016, the Governor Rauner at the time in General Assembly passed FEJA, the Future Energy Jobs Act. They changed that goal to 25% renewable by the year 2025, even though we were nowhere close. And last year in the CEJA legislation, a number of organizations supported, they increased that goal to 40% renewable by 2030. Again, it's great to have goals, but today we're less than 8% renewable energy in Illinois. And in central and southern Illinois, we're at 5.4% electrified. So what that's meant is we've closed baseload generation plants, coal plants, gas plants, with the hope that there would be enough renewable energy. And there, quite frankly, there isn't. And so we saw earlier this year, MISO, which is a regional grid operator, did a capacity auction. The price went up 47-fold for a capacity from $5 a megawatt day to $236. And then the Illinois Power Agency had to do their procurement to actually buy the energy that goes out to consumers. And what normally cost about $28 to $32 per megawatt jumped to $90. And actually, they had to do two auctions. And the second in July, they're paying $150 a megawatt hour, 5 times what it was a year ago. And so the reason that customers in central and southern Illinois are going to see about a 50% increase in their electric bills, some of it is because of policies that state legislators have made over the last 15 years. And we're not going to see that ease. We're losing baseload generation. There's 2 more plants scheduled to shut down later this year. We just simply don't have enough renewable energy to backfill that. So the energy costs are going to continue to be a big issue for consumers, for residents of Illinois, and businesses as well.
Yeah, the energy thing is huge. And maybe, I mean, nobody forgets about it because you get your bill every month. Maybe you don't understand why some of these increases are happening. But for our members, you know, it literally could be the difference between life and death. Maybe they choose not to run their air and they, you know, it gets too sweltering hot and bad things happen. Or they decide, well, I want to have some air this month somewhat, so I'm not going to buy medication, you know, that sort of thing. So the energy is an enormous issue in Illinois, and I know, you know, obviously around the country. So thank you for bringing that up and explaining that. I'm going to start to wrap up here because I know I told you guys I wouldn't take all day for you, but excuse me. I know you're not, you don't have a silver or a ball that's going to tell you what's going to happen in the near future sitting in front of you, but and not to put you on the spot, but what can we expect possibly in the next maybe the next 6 months as we get to the end of the year and into next? Any good news, or should we just you know, put our heads down and keep running and know that it's just going to be what it is?
Mark and I are going to play a game of chicken here. So answer the question first.
I wish I knew. If I knew the answer to that, I'd go play Mega Millions or Powerball as well.
Yeah,
Jeff, I don't think. I would just say I don't think we've hit the high point on inflation yet. I think we're going to continue to struggle with that. I think we're going to see the Fed raise interest rates. I know the discussion, they're talking another 0.75 of a point, for example. I think the cost of borrowing is going to get more expensive. The cost of credit card debt, buying a car, whatever it may be, the price of food, I think is going to continue to increase for a period of time. You know, the stock market is struggling. And traditionally, when you've gone into a recession, which, you know, a number of economists now think we're heading toward a recession, the stock market's down. What I would say is, you know, invest now. It's like going and buying on sale. And you know, and one of the things too that your members or anyone, whether they're an individual or business, can do during times of high inflation, you know, reduce expenses. Look at the bills that you have. Can you do without the gym membership, for example? Maybe cut a streaming service. As you said, Jeff, you know, taking your medicine and having food are important. What expenses can you eliminate? You know, potentially boost your earnings. You know, if you're an older American and maybe you left the workforce, maybe there's somewhere you can go. You might even be able to work from home 5 or 10 hours a week to add some additional income. I would encourage folks to pay off debt. If you have the ability, you know, do that, because as interest rates rise, you're going to be paying more and more. And like I said, now's a good time. If you have disposable income, now's the time to invest, because, you know, you're buying stocks at a discount. And It's like my wife when she goes to Kohl's shopping and says, "Hey, I got a 30% off," she'll go and shop more. So again, I don't know what the future holds. I don't think we've hit the depths yet before we start coming out of it. We'll see. The Fed's going to be has been very aggressive in trying to control inflation, and they're trying to stay on the edge where they reduce the inflation without pushing the economy into a recession.
Jeff, I couldn't have Mark summarized it extraordinarily well. I don't think I could improve upon that.
Good dodge, Rob. Good job. Hey, with that, I really appreciate this. This has been a great discussion, and again, we're going to wrap it up here. We're towards the end of our time, so I'm going to give you both a minute to close and just tell us anything else you'd like to. Mark, go ahead.
Well, first, Jeff, again, thanks to you and Lori and the team at AARP for what you do advocating on behalf of your members every day. I advocate on behalf of manufacturers. Rob does on behalf of retailers across the state. So again, thank you for having us. Again, we're all in this together. Manufacturers will continue making products. I want to make sure there's not going to be a shortage. We'll continue, whether it's toilet paper or food or other supplies. You may see because of this, maybe there's not as many different products. Maybe you can't get 24 different flavors of Oreos. Maybe there's 10 flavors of Oreos, for example. But we're going to continue to provide the supplies that we need. It's not going to be like at the start of the pandemic where people struggled to find toilet paper, for example. We're going to continue to work. We're going to be in this together. I think this is an endemic. It's going to be around for a long time. But manufacturers are here to stay and continue providing those products that your members need and that Rob's members sell.
Thank you. Rob?
Yeah, Jeff, again, thank you for having us. I know Mark and I have spoken before. We enjoy doing this with you all. I think it's important to gain different perspectives, both from you and you for your membership from us. I think it leads to a better informed citizenry. I think, to spin off a little bit what Mark said there, things are not as bad as they have been in the past, right? I'm not glossing over that it's easy, but if we go back to the stagflation of the 70s, for example, I'm just old enough to remember some of that. So if you dig back, it's not nearly as bad as it could have been. It could be, right? And I've said this before, I think in a previous panel we've had, I know I've said it elsewhere, we don't get necessarily, prior to the pandemic, we were used to getting anything we wanted basically the next day. Yeah. We can still get everything we want. We just might have to wait 3 or 4 days, right? It's not as if we're going without. And I try to do that, not because I'm making light of it, but because I think it's an important perspective that it's not like we're missing out on everything. So things will continue to improve. I think time does tend to heal all wounds, in this case, an economic wound. But I think we'll work through, our members and Mark's members will continue to work through. And I think together we'll be fine. Yeah.
Great point, Rob. Just relax and try to make the best of it, I think, is what we can do here. So.
And look out for each other. Look out for our neighbors,
Exactly.
Friends,
right. Right. And that's a great point. And I'm going to bring it up again real quickly before we, as the energy prices are so high and you have a neighbor who's a little older, go check on that neighbor. Maybe, they've made a decision to keep it hotter in their house than maybe their body could handle. So yes, look out for each other, check on your neighbor, and be good to one another. So yeah, thank you so much again, Mark and Rob. And thanks everybody for joining us today. Thank you, AARP members, volunteers, and listeners. And we look forward to our next live Facebook conversation with AARP and other special guests as we do navigate through these unprecedented times. If you, again, want more information from AARP, please go to our website at states.aarp.org/Illinois. Thanks, Rob and Mark, and everybody have a great day.
Thanks, Jeff.
Here are 4 simple ways to save on utilities year-round. Get a programmable thermostat. Did you know lowering your home's temperature by 7 to 10 degrees for 8 hours as you sleep can save about $100 a year? Ease your internet speed. Internet providers always push the newest, fastest options, but a basic service of 20 megabits per second is fine for the typical family to surf, email, and stream videos. Get a tankless water heater. These units produce hot water on demand, and they're up to 30% more efficient than traditional hot water heaters. Clean your trap. Did you know that a dryer can lose 75% of its efficiency if lint clogs its trap? If you clean it after every use, you can save about $100 on the annual cost of operating a dryer. For more savings tips, go to aarp.org.